And after all the excitement of a second, even less conclusive battle, represented here, oh, yeah, one round of combat, I didn't really mark what happened, but there were just a few hits on ships. Zodani are sending them back. Imperials will get to repair them this upcoming turn. So they just arrived this turn. You're sort of in flight. Basically nothing happened. Joyous managed to bomb Arcadia's garrison, which doesn't allow them to claim it because they don't have any troops with them. And that's about it. Movement around, but the big thing that happened is consolidation of these fleets, ships moving in. Now, here, not too big a deal. The two fleets, the Quarter and 18th, are still there. I loosed a bunch of admirals for whatever reason. Some additional forces here in the 23rd Fleet, which has no orders yet, I think. That just showed up. Still haven't rolled that 6, and still haven't rolled a lot of 1s and 6s. Granted, let's see, it's been 16 turns. I think we've gotten a few fleets. I think we've gotten the 3 fleets or so that we could have expected in that period. But, you know, there's 3 more out there, and one of them is the Warrant, which is the one we want. And we have not rolled, oh wait, no. 16 turns. Yeah, we should have gotten five fleets by now. So we're not getting many fleets, which means not many shots at the Warrant compared to what we should be getting. And we're not getting any 6s yet, which we should have gotten 2 or 3 of by now. So the Imperials are a little behind in terms of what they can get, but they've got all their battleships other than the Black Globe ones, which, if we weren't playing with that optional, would be available. You know, they would have been being pulled out of the pool. So, and they're pretty decent, so that kind of sucks. The consolidation doesn't hurt here because we had the 2 top leaders there. Over here, the 17th Colonial caused some kind of screw up, and now everybody's orders are all mixed up because people are running on orders that are like longer than they exist, and other people are going to have to write additional orders and leave blanks in there where they're resting. So that adds some confusion to the Zodani order writing this turn. Really, the Imperials are looking to try to hit the Zodani before the remainder of their fleet comes up. And that's really this. Once this comes up, the entire Zodani fleet will be in place. And then we probably want to wait until we have a better leader. But we're already committed to trying to launch an attack here at Yuri. Meanwhile, the Zodani are trying to pull up as many ships as they can. They'll have the Imperials at a disadvantage for jumping in. The Imperials don't have any tankers. We have like 1 with the Corridor fleet. So, because we took losses on tankers before. So we're in a position where, oh wow, cool, tankers with bombing capability. Again, you know, where did this come from? It's not in the ship manifest. It's not in the fighting ships book. And I haven't heard it referenced anywhere else, but you can imagine like what that might be. It might be able to loose its fuel tanks as an explosive, you know? Probably not, because it's just hydrogen, but who knows? It seems like a weird decision to me. But on the other hand, the idea of an assault ship, this might be like broadswords or something like that, something along those concepts. The broadsword is covered, but it's too small. It's not a real troop transport. It does have firepower and bombardment capability. It has a weapons bay, actually. Anyway, wandering away into the minutia of what the ship counters may be meant to represent, sort of, kind of. So that one actually vaguely makes sense if the Imperials had a bigger, I mean, or they had a ton of, broadsword class ships in play. So where are we? Yeah. So the situation was much more complicated for the Zodani in terms of how to organize their troops, and now I've got to deal with the plots that result from that. But yeah, we're coming to the position where the Imperials are going to hit. The question is how much of the Zodani fleet will be in place. It's probably going to be almost everything except that first assault fleet is my guess, but I'm not positive. We'll see. Anyway, the Imperials have no easy way out. All their non-streamlined ships are going to have to basically be destroyed. They can bring maybe 6 of them out of there. Partial streamlines can pull off the gas giants in order to retreat. You're on, I think, turn 27. Things get to be, this might be turn 28. Things get to be so much of a mess that it's hard to tell, but it looks like I've done movements for turn 28. First of all, reinforcement-wise, the Imperials got more. Just another fleet and the resources that come with it, which were an admiral who took over the 23rd Fleet, changing the plot requirements, luckily downward, so I could actually have ignored them, and a tanker. I think, I'm not sure. Yeah, I got 2 counters left, and the warrant hasn't come out yet. The warrant would be incredibly effective, and given that the big battle hadn't happened yet, it's possible that the Imperial capability to react quickly under their under what is effectively their highest leader, the guy with the warrant, could make a big difference. But it's probably a little late still at this point for it to happen, because it looks like that battle is going to happen. Now, of course, the Imperials could say, hey, in order to turn things around, I need the warrant, so I should just fall back until I get it, whatever, right? The check that's in place there was the victory point conditions. We're not seeing the gaming mechanisms of the victory conditions. Hey, let me try to grab just a few more victory points, put the threat a little bit tighter, whatever. But I do feel like the need to defend forward is necessary to understand what range we should be in. Now, right now, we're at 340, 342, and we still haven't seen a turnaround. But again, the warrant is coming exceedingly late. These ships aren't there, whatever. So the Imperium is missing some of the things that they really kind of want in order to turn the tide. We'll see how that develops, because we're going to see the effects of them missing those things. I think they're going to be launching their counterattack. Of course, they could lose their entire fleet in such an action. What else? Not much. Really, collisions and annoyances of the plotting situation. It's really getting painful with this number of fleets on the board. I've got a sort of unimportant battle happening here that keeps delaying the Graham fleet from moving forward. Other than that, I don't know what. 10th finally fell, 11 more points over. That brings us to the 350 something rank. There wasn't a whole hell of a lot that the Imperials could have done to try to take that away. Maybe some stabs to take something like Wretch. I don't know how much that's worth. That's worth 6, that would have been enough. So again, it's looking like under these conditions, 350, which I thought was outside the bounds really, is not an invalid choice for a Zodani victory point as opposed to 300. That 300 is it's ridiculously easy to achieve. Now, should half the games end in a Zodani decisive automatic victory? I don't know. I also don't know if this is the halfway, if this is the halfway point. I feel like the Zodanis have gotten some breaks at this point with the way the game's laid out. But here's the thing. Let's say I don't make that 350, but I make the 300. Or the 200, which should be trivial to make. By turn 26, or some point after that, where I still have 200 victory points, any point after that, I can make the decision of, you know what, the war's going badly, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to hold out very long, I'll take that marginal victory. So 100% of games should still end up as Zodani victories under any reasonable circumstances. But at least it shouldn't be near 100% that happened due to the automatic victory. It feels disturbing to me that this is what I'm looking at. That the whole victory conditions would have to be revamped in significant ways for this design to work. It's not simply a let's shift the automatic victory a little bit higher. Maybe we'd have to shift everything by 50 points. Would that do it? Well, 250 is still too damn easy. There's a huge range between the decisive victory and that turnaround point. So you might have to shift the turnaround point. All kinds of stuff like that. And I wouldn't want to do any of that without significant playtesting. It's a fairly long game. Probably that's why the victory conditions aren't better nailed down, like if it wasn't as long a game as it is, maybe the victory conditions would get nailed down a little bit better or a lot better. But here's the thing. They're just so far off, it almost feels like they didn't play many games at all. Like maybe they took a pathologically bad strategy with the Zodani every time it played. Maybe the playtesting was just a couple of people. I don't know. We had a list of playtesters, and it included people who should know better. If I recall correctly, maybe we didn't have a list of playtesters. That's sort of an iffy thing. Yeah, I don't think there is one. We had we do. Advice assistant in playtesting. We have like 4 names. Okay. At least one of which, Frank Chadwick, is heavily involved in the situation, and John Astle as well, both in supplemental design. You really shouldn't have your developers, whatever, counting as your playtesting. And that leaves a couple more people who may well have been people in the company or associated or friends or whatever, who were just the other people who playtested this. Maybe this just never got anything like the kind of playtesting that you would kind of expect. When you look at something like Invasion Earth and how bad a game it is, you begin to wonder, did they have anything like a mature playtesting environment at GDW? At least for the science fiction stuff. Who the hell knows for the World War II stuff, I mean, Europa was considered, sort of a gold standard at one point, but I got no idea, nobody's ever come back and said, yeah, and it's so finely balanced. I've never heard that. It's more the scope of it all. Well, anyway. As you can see, maybe assumptions were different on different parts of the hobby. All right. I guess it's time for me to do my plotting, much as I don't want to do it. You know, playing this helps me avoid doing things that I actually should be doing. Maybe the actual key to my enjoyment here, which is this is helping me drown out the things in my life that need to get done that I'm not doing. And if I like give up and say, yeah, I don't want to finish. I don't want to keep beating this dead horse. Maybe. I don't know, because every time that I've played it, I've almost always come away with a positive impression of the game, but that I had fucked up something. A positive impression of my enjoyment of the game, not of the game itself. The system, everything. I think it's all crap. You know, these percentage numbers, all the effort you have to put through. I think it's horrible, but somehow it's always kind of left me with a positive remembrance of, you know, having some enjoyment with it. And I'm seeing that again here. So maybe it's not just my circumstances. It's hard to tell. And I see other people who are like, well, I couldn't possibly recommend this game, but they seem to be having a fun time with it all the same. It seems really, really weird to me. It almost seems to drive that kind of feeling. 29, essentially nothing happens. We're basically just waiting for the Imperial fleet to stumble into here. As far as I'm concerned, the Zidani, you know, they've got what they can grab, unless one side or the other can get a victory. We're at kind of a stalemate here. Now, one of the things is, I don't know the size of the Zidani Empire, but I can tell you this much. It's a whole lot smaller. Like, I don't know if this is the entirety of the fleet that the Zidani Empire could reasonably deploy over. Each turn is probably a month, given the jump scale for Traveler. So, you know, we're 2.5 years in or whatever into this war. Whether this is the maximal resources that the Zidani Empire in a state of war could produce, you know, it feels like the reinforcements come in too slowly overall. But I'll tell you this much. There is no way in hell that the Imperium has so little resources. I mean, it is so huge comparatively that it would not be able to muster more forces over time than what we're seeing here. So if this is the baseline for what the Zidani have, the Imperium certainly should have a whole lot more in reserve. And unless, you know, there's attacks going on in other sectors or whatever during this war, this is not sufficient, you know, to stop the empire, to throw them back on their knees so far that they would just give in, you know, and say, okay, that's it, you can have this territory. There might be other pressures. This might be a war of opportunity. I don't seem to remember it as being one. I think there's more this hope that the Imperium just sort of collapses or whatever. But I don't remember too much about my whatever fake history there is about the Traveler universe. But it seemed like an ill-conceived war. From the Zidani point of view. On the other hand, the game just kind of blanks through all that. It doesn't give a good argument for why this is a decisive, you know, victory for the Zidani and whatever. It's hard to define those things. It's along the lines. I mean, if you look at like the Japanese versus American situation in World War II, it feels sort of like that. Japan was not going to be able to face the entire might of the United States, but there were other wars going on, etc. There were other things to concern the U.S. where maybe they could get away with grabbing land and coming to some sort of agreement that the Pacific is less important to the United States than anything else. Maybe something could. This is not the heart of the imperial territory. Maybe the Soleimani Rim War is going on at this point, or something along those lines. I don't really recall, but overall, it does feel like there would be more resources available if there was a major Zodani incursion of this nature. I don't really recall. Anyway, I'm just BSing because I'm waiting for something to crack. Big decision time for the Imperials. I have myself plotted for the entire fleet to reach here this turn. It's a dangerous attack. Okay, I would go with it. Except, this is the turn that the fucking warrant showed up. I built myself a cruiser for the 100th Fleet. I've got a good leader who's carrying the warrant, has a fast cruiser. He could get into here next turn, which means a 2-turn delay, I could have a good leader. Well, what's coming in? We know these are leaving. First assault is coming in. This turn, it's not going to do anything. Next turn, probably about there. So in 2 turns, that's going to be here. It'll be able to refuel and jump in. I kind of can't risk it. I can't, 1 turn earlier, and maybe I could delay things. But as it stands, I know that this is a big fleet. How do I know? Because everything else is actually accounted for. I know the Sword World ships. I know everything's funneled into here that can. I know that these are replacement fleets. These are fleets that are fleeing the battle, basically. So I think I got to go in and do the fight. And that's what I was planning on, for this to be sort of perhaps the last turn in the war. Because if the Imperials fuck up here, if they lose the battle, they will lose a great deal. How much, I don't know. However many unstreamlined ships they have, but for 6. Because there is a gas giant here, so we could get out with everything else. But I think there are enough unstreamlined ships that this could be an incredibly painful thing. I've only got 1 tanker. Didn't bother replacing the tankers, which I probably should have to reduce the danger here, but honestly, I don't want to play that long a game. Somebody estimated it would take like 80 turns for the Imperials to get a full victory or something like that. Yeah, but if the war were to turn, that would make a difference. But the war's not going to turn on this battle in favor of the Imperials. The best they can do is push the stalemate line a little further back and cause enough damage that maybe this fleet doesn't change things too much. But at some point or another, we have to turn the Zodani fleet backwards, right? And if we spread out and try to take planets for points or whatever, well, I don't think things go well for us. They may not go terribly badly, but that's not a way to win it. The way to win it is to have that decisive fleet battle, to destroy the enemy. And I don't feel like threatening some planets that are 50 points already over the decisive victory conditions or whatever is sufficient. The only way I see it is by causing this sort of final major battle between the accumulated fleets. And right now I should have a numerical advantage, if there is such a thing, for the Imperials. There may not be. It just may not be possible for the Imperials to get a numerical advantage. I'm not going to have a leadership advantage either. I've got a shitty leader in place. So did the Zodani, but that's beside the point. I don't know how. I think theirs is not as shitty. I'm not going to have that advantage. I'll have the tech advantage. The only question comes down to what do the numbers look like, and I got no idea. I could count the countermix and have a view for that. That's something I probably should have done long ago. See if it's possible for the Imperials to win this grand battle, no matter what. But whatever, this is what we're going with, and in we go, I guess. The numbers end up relatively close, 251, 244. Again, the Zidani have the advantage on leadership, which is the more important for some reason of the two. It's the non-optional one, so that's one side of it being important. But I've got my grumps about why, which I went into before. The Imperials have another 24 points waiting. They have a leadership bonus waiting. But there are a lot of ships still sitting in this first assault fleet. And there isn't a lot, the Imperials didn't lose a lot that I refrained from buying back or anything like that. I've got some some low-value cruisers that I could buy back. The one thing the Imperials have going for them, though, is if this ends up being attritional to their advantage, or at least even, their replacement rate is higher starting on turn 30. And we're pretty close to turn 30. So between that and the fact that I'm close to my location where the replacements come, the Zidani replacement rate is 2 squadrons instead of 3. Let's ignore troops. They don't really matter. The Imperials have a bigger advantage there. But I just don't know. We'll see what the battle gives us. But I don't have a lot of hope. It doesn't look to me like the Imperial... And there's something major. There's the Sword World fleet. That was 18 bombardment factors. But, it's a fair size fleet. We've got this first assault fleet. We've got ships that are out there being repaired that could have been left behind to help fight. So across the board, it feels like the Zidani just have the numerical advantage everywhere. And there ain't much I can do about that. Given the way that the victory conditions are scheduled, with the idea that the Zidani should be stopped and rolled back at some point, I'm not really certain that it's not like World War II. It doesn't seem to fit that model, even though the particular victory condition model was along that line. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, at some point or another, the game, you have to decide, hey, the time box of the game is no longer valid, or whatever. And without really understanding the universe to the point that the designer does, it's very hard to see what was being attempted here. There aren't notes that help you understand too much about this. Well, let me make sure I'm right about that. The information there is in the game itself is the prelude to the war, a series of press releases or communications or whatever that indicate the war is going to start. And then afterwards, there's role-playing ideas, how to use this as a campaign backdrop. And it's really, really tough to see, to try to understand the situation. Yes, there's a blurb in the Encyclopedia Galactica or whatever equivalent there is for Traveller, but it's not going to tell you too much. And it's just really hard to try to, and I didn't go to look that up, but my feeling is that the Zidani get stopped, and I'm not really sure that they 10 easily within, again, not just the time box, but the space box of this game. So yeah. All right, let's roll some dice. Things I did forget before I start rolling those dice, that I did forget to mention, I found another tanker in the Imperial fleet that I just hadn't noticed. It was visible enough. There was one in each fleet. So that means I can actually withdraw up to 12 non-streamlined ships. But we're going to have to stick around a while. So we're going to take something of a beating if this starts to go against us. The numbers are close enough, though, that it's not going to go too far against us, I think. We can see the kind of decrease we're getting here, and we've lost a total of 16 points off the Zodani, whereas we've lost 44 off the Imperials. Some of that has to do with just the numerical inequity, but not much. We're looking at 45 hits to 50 hits against the Imperials, 45 against the Zodani. As an example on this second round of combat. One of the reasons for that is because the Imperials are culling their fleet in such a way that they're taking these heavy ships that maybe have good payoffs in terms of the amount of strength points that are being destroyed, whereas the Zodani are actually taking more of their ships on damage. I did kill a few ships, but the rest I'm just damaging because that's easier to repair. Now, it's not trivial to repair. I can't do the repair job up at the front, which is kind of a pity. That would totally change the nature of this. But because I'm able to hold the space without retreating, and I'm fueled up and whatnot, what that means is that the Imperial fleet, the Zodani fleet, one, doesn't have to get rid of what it can't fuel with tankers. I don't know how many. I got 2 tankers as well. So all they have to, they can just take their damage where it's most efficient to do so. Now, I'm not doing a massive analysis and calculation on that, but I'm going by feel rather than anything else. In some cases, I might be making mistakes. For example, these look kind of good to get hit. I've been hitting some of them close to the same. This has a little bit more firepower proportionally. What that does mean, though, is that the Zodani fleet has to send out another group to go back home, and it's going to take almost twice as long to make my way back, fix, and come back into the battlefield. Is that something I can afford? I feel like it is. I feel like I have enough numerical superiority that I can try to milk my replacement points for everything that they're worth, with the 40th Fleet coming in and whatnot. The Imperials have gotten themselves down to all but this ship can withdraw, and I'm going to withdraw. And I think this is the end of the line for me playing out this game, because I mean, I could keep screwing around with it, but it is going to be a massively long attritional war that I think the Imperium loses. Yes, they're going to get the better commander in place. They're going to be able to, therefore, strike when and where they choose with their big fleet. But if they're going into some place like this, I just don't see a way that I'm able to force the Zodani to attack me. And I don't see a way of dislodging them. So strategically, I feel like we're kind of at a dead end here. If I were to split the Imperial fleet and send part of it up here and part of it here and whatnot, well, the Zodani can split their fleets as well, and we'll be able to probably get better leadership overall out of it, just by the way the leaders are associated. had that warrant been available earlier, maybe it would have made a difference. Maybe I could have caught a Zodani fleet off guard. But right now, the Zodani are not attempting to grab more territory. They're just trying to hold on to what they have for as long as they can and see whether or not, whether or not the Imperials are going to bash their heads against a wall like this, or are we going to try to go someplace, try to launch a threat over here from behind? What does that do? I don't know. I mean, we could end up just ignoring each other, and because the way supply works in this game, the refueling is the only real supply other than reserves and whatnot coming up. So we could just be in a race to grab territories, and what would that end up looking like? It just wouldn't feel very. It would feel chaotic, and it would just be playing with this number chart without meaning. So yeah, I'm calling it here. I don't feel like I've come to any great answer, except for the fact that 350 and maybe bump all the victory conditions 50 points might produce a more interesting balance to the game. It does feel like I've gotten to some sort of, gosh, I barely made that 350. Maybe maybe somewhere between 25 and 50% of games, the Zodani will be able to get there before they're stopped. But if I can get close to that, then I'm in the position where I can take the marginal victory and say it's over in nearly 100% of games. So I don't see that as a valid fix. I don't know what kind of victory conditions would work in this game. Where the Imperial fleet never actually gets significantly bigger than the Zodani fleet. If we keep fighting out I have to batter the Zodani down, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I'm taking heavier losses. Yes, I get my replacements at a better rate, but this is a lot of points of replacements. I'm taking significantly more points because I had to take losses because I was attacking into a planet and didn't have, the capability to win the planet. I can't fall back because then the Zodani could take more valuable places, right? There are some up here in the Messene. There's bases here that have value. Even Kano at 7. That's not an unreasonable amount of points to keep boosting. So it feels like that would be some sort of further defeat. I think I can probably prevent the Zodani from gaining anything else, especially with that good leadership. If I see them split up their fleets to go capture stuff, boom, I can go hit them and take them out piecemeal. Or maybe it's a guessing game and oops, I hit the wrong fleet. But refueling considerations, etc., it would start becoming, a game of Find the Lady or something like that at best. What's the other possibility other than, there's basically two options for the Imperials. Try to blow this thing away, and I don't see that the recharge rates are going to allow for that. I'm going to consistently be taking more losses because a certain proportion of my maximal strength fleet at any time is going to be unstreamlined. So I'm not going to be able to refuel. Although I could buy back these tankers and make that a little less expensive. Maybe. But still, I'm taking hits that are going to cost me more to rebuild. Maybe eventually I'll force the Zodani to start destroying ships because they can't afford the extra cost for shipping things back and forth. The other option is to split up and, hope that I just get I outguess my opponent in so many different ways, and I think that's a pretty weak argument to try to go forward on. So we're going to close this up here, and I'll give what I can of a review of it afterwards. But yeah, there is nothing to recommend this game. Yet somehow I had my enjoyment in it again, and I can't really explain that, and that's going to be a hard task in the review portion.